The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street is episode 22 in the first season of the American television anthology series The Twilight Zone. The episode was written by Rod Serling, the creator-narrator of the series. It originally aired on March 4, 1960. In 2009, Time named it one of the 10 best Twilight Zone episodes. Opening narration, plot summary: Maple Street is full of playing children and adults talking, when a shadow passes over, accompanied by a roar and a flash of light. Several adults notice, but there is no alarm. However, the residents soon discover that their electricity has been cut off. They gather together in the street to discuss the matter. Pete Van Horn volunteers to walk out of the neighborhood to discover the extent of the problem, and he goes to check the station. His neighbor, Steve Brand, wants to go into town, but Tommy, a boy from the neighborhood, tells him not to leave the street. Tommy has read a story of an alien invasion causing similar phenomena, and he predicts Steve will probably not be allowed to leave. Furthermore, in the story, the aliens are living as a family that appears human. The power outage is meant to isolate and contain the neighborhood. Meanwhile, another resident, Les Goodman, tries unsuccessfully to start his car. He gets out and begins to walk back to the other residents when the car starts on its own. The bizarre behavior of his car makes Les the object of immediate suspicion. One woman begins to discuss his late night spent standing in the garden looking up at the sky. Les claims to be only an insomniac. Later that night, Steve, acting as the voice of reason, tries to defuse the situation and prevent it from becoming a witch hunt. Charlie, one of the loudest and most aggressive residents, pressures Steve about his hobby, building a radio no one has ever seen. Suspicion falls on Steve as he sarcastically remarks that he talks to monsters from outer space on his radio. Steve and the other neighbors continue to argue. Panic builds when a shadowy figure is seen walking toward them. Charlie, now hostile, grabs a shotgun and immediately shoots the shadow, thinking it to be the alleged monster. When the crowd reaches the fallen figure, they realize it is Pete Van Horn, returning from his scouting mission. The shot had hit him in the chest, killing him instantly. Although Charlie insists that he did not know, and was trying to protect everyone, no one believes him. Suddenly, the lights in Charlie's house come on and he panics as the crowd begins accusing him of being both a murderer and the monster responsible for the power being out, and even Steve can't defend Charlie, or what he has done. Charlie makes a run for his house while the other residents chase him, throwing stones, one of them hitting Charlie in the temple, creating a bleeding gash. Terrified, Charlie attempts to deflect suspicion onto Tommy, the boy who had originally suggested alien infiltration. Several neighbors agree, as Tommy was the only one who knew about the aliens' plan. Lights begin flashing on and off in houses throughout the neighborhood. Lawnmower and car engines start and stop for no apparent reason. The mob becomes hysterical, with terrified residents smashing windows and taking up weapons as the situation devolves into an all-out riot. Some of the residents take up firearms and shoot anyone they can. The scene cuts to a nearby hilltop, where it is revealed the mysterious meteor that had flown overhead is, indeed, an alien spaceship. Its inhabitants, two alien observers, are watching the riot on Maple Street while using a device to manipulate the neighborhood's power. They comment on how easy it was to create paranoia and panic, and conclude that the easiest way to conquer Earth is to let the people of Earth destroy themselves as their own worst enemy. Closing narration, production: the aliens are wearing uniforms left over from the 1956 science fiction film Forbidden Planet. Also, the mock-up set of the retractable stairway, leading into the lower half of the C-57D cruiser from the same film, is reused for this scene. At the end of the episode, a stock footage effects shot of the cruiser in space can be seen. Note that the cruiser is shown upside down when compared to its orientation in Forbidden Planet. Cast and characters: Claude Akins as Steve Brand, Ann Barton as Mrs. Brand, Barry Atwater as Les Goodman, Lee Wagner as Mrs. Goodman, Jack Weston as Charlie Farnsworth, Lynn Guild as Mrs. Farnsworth, Jan Hansleek as Tommy, Amzie Strickland as a woman, Burt Metcalf as Don Martin, Mary Gregory as Sally, Jason Johnson as a man, Joan Sudlow as Old Woman, Sheldon Allman is the first alien, William Walsh is the second alien, Robert McCord is the ice cream vendor, Ben Away as Pete Van Horn. Remake. A 2003 remake of the episode was created in the latest readaptation of The Twilight Zone, but it was renamed The Monsters Are on Maple Street. The difference between the two is that the remake is more about the fear of terrorism. When the power surge happens in the remake, it is caused, not by aliens, but instead by the government, specifically the United States Army, experimenting on how small towns react to the fear of terrorism. In the end, the neighborhood takes out its anger and frustration on a family who never left their house after the power surge occurred, thinking that they caused it since they still have power. Other media. A radio dramatization of this episode was produced in the mid-2000s as part of the Twilight Zone radio series, featuring Frank John Hughes as Steve Brand. It was included in the Twilight Zone Radio Dramas a Euro Collection 12 collection. A graphic novel version was published by the Savannah College of Art and Design partnered with Walker and Company. A short story version was published in Stories from the Twilight Zone and ends with a race of two-headed aliens moving into Maple Street. This episode served to be a major influence on science fiction in the decades that followed. Among the films that drew their inspiration from this episode include The Trigger Effect, directed by Akine's nephew, David Carap, and The Mist. Early industrial music band Skinny Puppy made heavy use of samples from this episode in the track Monster Radio Man on their album Back and Forth Series 2. In the Supernatural TV series Angel episode, Are You Now or Have You Ever Been?, the main protagonist, Angel, is mobbed, in a similar way to the characters in this episode, while under the influence of a paranoia demon controlling a hotel. Executive producer David Greenwalt admitted he got the idea and way of being mobbed after watching this episode. See also, Cold War, McCarthyism, Second Red Scare, Crowd Psychology, References. Further reading, DeVoe, Bill Trivia from the Twilight Zone. Albany, Georgia, Bear Manor Media. ISBN 978-1-59393-136-0 grams, Martin The Twilight Zone, Unlocking the Door to a Television Classic. Churchville, Maryland, OTR Publishing. ISBN 978-0-9703310-9-0. External links. The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street at the Internet Movie Database. TV.com episode page, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street a Euroscript.